Good morning, sports fans. You're listening to 96.9 FM WHYR-LP Baton Rouge Community Radio.
This is Eric Hatfield along with Coach Perry Daniels, and we are here to bring you the latest, the greatest, the best, and the most entertaining in high school, college, and professional sports. You are listening to Louisiana All American Sports.
Good morning, sports fans. You're listening to 96.9 FM WHYR-LP Baton Rouge Community Radio.
This is Eric Hatfield along with Coach Perry Daniels, and we are here to bring you the latest, the greatest, the best, and the most entertaining in high school, college, and professional sports. You are listening to Louisiana All American Sports. Good morning and welcome to Louisiana All American Sports. Hope you guys had a very happy and safe 4th of July, and thank you for joining us here on Saturday morning. I am Eric Hatfield.
And I'm Coach Perry Daniels.
And while you all are out there or on your way to the beach or getting ready for a barbecue or maybe on your way to the grocery store, hey, we still got to give you your weekly infusion of Louisiana All American Sports.
Or on your way down to New Orleans to enjoy Essence Festival.
Oh yeah. I don't know how I could forget that. And folks, that's if you've never been or if you have nothing better to do, that is always a good time, good food, great entertainment. The nightlife is jumping off the wall. Get down to the Big Easy if you're looking for something to do and are still undecided or unsettled. That is always a good time every year. And
hopefully last night they had the opportunity, some of our listeners had the opportunity to enjoy Prince performing at Essence Fest.
Man. I didn't get to see it, but I know Prince always gets, even little old Prince,
right,
sure gets down.
you know he had to have the place rocking.
Yes, indeed. All right, so hopefully there's no purple rain falling today. It's not expected to be any in the forecast. Might be tomorrow, though, so get out and have some fun now while you can. I guess we'll start our show off on the hardwood, and I guess we'll discuss the amateur level. We've been talking for several shows now about the lawsuit filed by Ed O'Bannon on behalf of several former NCAA collegiate athletes, filed against the NCAA for them capitalizing on their use of their images and likenesses in video games such as the famous EA Sports series that ran for many years until, frankly, some of the attention from this lawsuit got it shut down, and other ways in which they capitalized off the athletes' names and likenesses. Anyway, the trial phase has come to an end. Perry ran across an article that it definitely got my attention. It was definitely interesting. I'll let you lead in with it because I don't know what to think, actually.
Well, and I'm a little hesitant because I don't have it in front of me to source it, Eric, and we want to make sure that we do that.
Okay, we got it right here.
Yes. According to Steve Berkowitz of USA Today Sports, he is saying that the NCAA has come to their senses and they have offered a settlement in this case. And they are proposing that every athlete that joins into the lawsuit receives $20,000 apiece under the terms of the agreement. And that could go up depending on how many athletes from the year 2005 on, I believe, Eric, can be included in the lawsuit up to $40 million.
That, I don't know what to feel about that. On the one hand, I would think for your garden variety athlete that's in the class action suit, that is probably a reasonable monetization. Ed O'Bannon, obviously, guys like Ed O'Bannon were stars at the time. Guys like he and his brother and the whole UCLA team and other people of their ilk were a draw. But for John Q, guy on the bench, number 5 at Wisconsin at that time, who was there, the guy might have looked like him, but other than that, I couldn't tell you his name, hence I'm just saying number 5,
right,
which is all you'd have seen in the game.
Right.
That's probably pretty reasonable, So $40 million total, this is one of those things, usually I have very little trouble quantifying stuff on a per-person basis, but this is uncharted territories because the NCAA has never been asked to pay up. On its surface, it sounds like a reasonable settlement, and I think it's smart the NCAA took some kind of step forward to try to mitigate their damage, which is going to be substantial. $40 million, even for an organization like that, is a lot of money.
So Judge Claudia Wilkins still has to approve this. This hasn't been approved. And people that were close to the case have said that this could have gone as high as $120 million against the NCAA.
They're getting in front of it. They're trying to get in front of it, and it sounds like Judge. It's really going to be a matter of what the attorneys think they can push and nudge. I think if everyone's smart, they'll settle at the end of the day, because the NCAA is trying to hedge a potential $80 million of losses, and obviously I don't think they would have gotten the whole total $120 million if it went straight to the judge. But it does sound like Judge Wilkin. She tipped her hand a couple of times with some of her comments, and sounded like she was leaning towards the plaintiffs in this suit, with a couple of remarks she made about sharing money with the smaller schools to maintain competitive balance. Well, if they don't pay players to maintain competitive balance, why aren't they spreading the money to some of the smaller schools? Things like that tells me that she is probably leaning in that direction. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
I agree wholeheartedly, man, and it's going to be interesting to see how the final results shape the future of amateur athletics here in the United States.
Right. It's opening. It is open. There's no getting around it. It's opening the doors. I don't know what's going to happen in the long run, but I do think the players are going to be much more, I was going to say better compensated, but actually better involved in sharing the benefits. I mean, things like life insurance long term, maybe a better stipend, especially at the big revenue generating schools. Right. I mean, I think that what the athletes put in and risk, I think is going to be, they're going to be a little bit better compensated on the back end. So I think that this is the beginning of something. I don't know exactly where it's going, but the NCAA, look, there's what you get in, there's what you get out, what you put in and what you get out, and the NCAA is getting more than its fair share of the bargain, in spite of
clearly
free education and blah, blah, blah. These student athletes put in way more work than the average student. The average chemistry student that might be the smartest person in the world, they're putting in their bodies and they're putting in a lot more time.
And the time is mandatory. It's
right.
not like it's optional.
Right, exactly.
They have to do it, and coaches don't hesitate to say, well, it's not the chemistry department that has you here.
Right, that's right. And you know what? So it's not the chemistry department, it's the athletic department, so let's talk turkey.
Right.
That's how I feel about it anyway.
So and here's a very good caveat of this proposed settlement, Eric. If after 5 years the settlement funds are still not fully distributed, the money would convert into a hardship-based scholarship fund designed to assist potential claimants who did not graduate with a college degree and who wish to return to college.
That's fantastic.
That is.
I like that. I really like that.
Yes.
I like that a lot. That's one of those things you can. Anyway, if I'm the judge, I can go to bed at night with that kind of an award.
Right.
I think it's pretty fair.
So everything's going. It looks like the perfect storm is coming against the NCAA. When you partner this with the ruling in Chicago by the Labor Board that has classified, that says that the college students are eligible to unionize, along with this settlement, there are going to be major changes in the NCAA.
Yeah, there are. They're going to have to recoil quickly. The good news for the NCAA is that, if there is any, is that they have the resources to do it.
Right.
They're hardly hurting. So that's good. That's interesting to know, and we're probably going to hear in the fall a whole lot more about this stuff. I know there are going to be some stories that pop out of the woodworks as we get to the bread and butter of college athletics, which is college football, just about 2 months away.
Man.
Not even 2 months away.
Man.
So it's going to be exciting. All right, still on the hardwood. I'll get to one little story. Well, not a little story. It's kind of a big story. Brooklyn Nets coach Jason Kidd was effectively traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. The general manager, John Hammond of the Bucks, and Jason Kidd go way back. They have a long-standing relationship. And Kidd, after he got off to an extremely rocky start in Brooklyn, got very hot, did a very good job with what he had to work with, got his team to the second round of the playoffs before falling to the eventual conference champion Heat. And anyway, I guess that Mr. Hammond saw what he liked and made a move early and arranged a trade for Jason Kidd from the Brooklyn Nets to the Milwaukee Bucks. They fired Coach Larry Drew. He said on Thursday his sudden firing came as a surprise, but he has no choice really but to accept his fate being, canned. Larry Drew, if you remember back in the 1990s, was the head coach at Valparaiso, made a run in the 1997 NCAA basketball tournament. His son Homer Drew hit one of the dramatic game-winning shots. That's from memory. There might be one of y'all out there that I might have missed a detail or two that could correct me. But anyway, his star took off ever since then, making it all the way to the NBA. The Bucks, though, really never took off. They made it as low seeds in the playoffs once or twice, and then after Brandon Jennings was traded to Detroit, they never had much punch. So Drew is on his way out. The interesting thing, though, that has made Kidd kind of a pariah among the coaching ranks, there is an unwritten rule in the coaching fraternity at every level, at professional, college, I would imagine at high school too, is you don't start, the etiquette is you don't inquire or discuss the coaching position if there's an incumbent in place. In other words, Larry Drew was the coach of the Bucks. He had not been fired. And the unwritten rule in coaching, as I've heard for years and years and years, is if you are a head coach, you don't talk about another position while somebody else is still in place. And it got really messy when they made the offer to Kidd. A lot of coaches were very outspoken. A lot of longtime beat reporters were very outspoken about how this was a big no-no and how Kidd was kind of in an unusual position to even get his first job right out of the gates with Brooklyn right after playing, and he only had the 1 year of coaching. They mentioned he got off to a rocky start and instead turned it around. I guess the question was, he had Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Darren Williams there, veterans. Well, over in Milwaukee, you got a lot of young guys, Jabari Parker, Johnny O'Brien, and he's going to have to start building an organization. He has no experience in that either. So there's been a lot of speculation on Kidd kind of violating the code, so to speak, the wisdom of John Hammond making this hire, and how Kidd is actually qualified to help build a young franchise like this from the ground up.
That's what I question, Eric, the qualifications now, and why would he get this offer? I really don't think that, he did a good job with the Nets. I understand that they made it to the playoffs. They were a veteran team. And I say that, but also he's only going to get better as a head coach.
Right.
He's only going to get better. This was his first year.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how the young guys react to him. He had some problems adjusting to this new position.
Sure.
This seems to be the new trend, though, now with Fisher now being hired.
And Steve Kerr.
Well, Steve Kerr's a little further removed than these two guys were.
Right.
Fisher and Kidd. These guys were fresh off the court.
Right. I got you. You're right. Absolutely right.
They went from playing to the next season being a head coach.
Right.
And that's going to be interesting to see if that's going to be the new trend in the NBA. But then I'm also concerned, well, I don't know if concern is the right word, but I'm surprised that, man, when did trading coaches become, the norm for the NBA?
Well, it's happened before. I mean, there's been conversation. It has happened
before.
But it does seem to be ramping up a little bit. But it's happened. It ain't the first time, it isn't the last. But
can you imagine the Zen Master being traded?
If somebody wants to pick up his $12 million a year contract and have the Knicks demand 5 number 1 picks, hey, go for it. I can imagine it.
Or Pat Riley when he was on the bench being traded.
It is kind of hard to wrap your mind around, and it's one of those situations where it doesn't happen very often. It certainly doesn't happen with the high. Which, you know what though, Perry, not in basketball, but I do remember a situation. I remember the details well. This was in the 1997 offseason after Bill Parcells coached the New England Patriots to Super Bowl 31. He had a falling out with Robert Kraft. That was he made the whole speech about if you're going to invite me to come over and cook, you should have me at least be able to buy some of the groceries.
Yes.
And
classic comment by Parcells.
And then the New York Jets, being themselves, reached into the Patriots' pond a little prematurely and signed him. They jumped on him for tampering. The Jets wound up coughing up a first round.
But I don't think that was part of the trade. I think that was a sanction by the NFL.
It was punitive.
Yes.
But you've had where I'm going with that is you've had really big names get involved in some messiness and some compensation in between franchises. It is a little odd though how it is. This definitely was a little unexpected though.
Yeah.
You know,
And I wonder, this particular scenario makes me wonder: is there something in New Jersey going on that
in where
that New Jersey,
said
right?
Brooklyn.
Oh, Brooklyn! Wow, I made the mistake.
You got me a couple of times on that one.
Yes, good.
It takes some getting used to. I'm sorry, man. Go ahead.
There's something in Brooklyn, thank you, going on that made Jason Kidd want to get out. Because ideally, you would think that's a pretty good situation
It seems pretty good, especially with his improvement at the end of the year. But as I said, John Hammond, he and John Hammond have a long history together.
Okay.
From what the press, they're buddies, is what the word that they kept using in the media over and over again.
There's nothing like working for your buddy or working with your buddy.
Right, and then the control issue. I think he's going to have a lot more personnel control, and all these coaches want control and power. No coach says, "I just want to stay in my little box and have as little control over my future as much as possible." I think
but look at all the stars they gave him in Brooklyn.
I know. I got to tell you,
he can't make better decisions than they made in Brooklyn.
I got to agree with that. I mean, but power is something, man. That just goes to show you, because the Bucks in recent years have been so mediocre at best, and it's usually less than that. And yet, I think the allure. I'm just going to take a guess here on a human level, working with your friend, and then having probably a little more control. I think that was. And a little pay raise, too. They did give him some more money. They bumped his salary up.
$15 million.
Yeah, and he was making, I want to say, 9, something like that, 8, 9. So that's a lot of money.
Hey, that's a lot of money.
So, yeah, I think those three in concert would probably do it all at once. Also, with the rumor mill, the NBA's theater just never stops. I mean, really, the NBA has its least theater during its regular season. If you think about it, they have the least theater when they're playing most of the time, because from the playoffs on, it is drama, 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 and especially in the offseason, the probable big fish in the realistic pool of free agents that are looking for new locations. I say that because there are 3 guys out there that I don't think are going anywhere realistically. But Carmelo Anthony is the one who probably has the best chance of leaving his current team, and he has met with 2 different teams in the last week. On Wednesday, he met with and worked out with briefly with the Houston Rockets. Interestingly, Carmelo Anthony, who wears number 7 in New York, was wearing a number 7 jersey in Houston, and Jerry Lin, who is number 7, starting point guard for the Rockets, walked in and found that a trifle odd. Didn't say much about that, though. So he's like, what am I, chopped liver? But he also met with L.A., and heard their pitch as to why he could be the right guy to become the next face of the franchise, because Kobe probably only has another year or 2 left. But they had their meeting. There weren't a lot of details that were released. The one conspicuous detail was that Kobe Bryant was not able to make it back from a family vacation in Europe in time for the meeting. But at the same time, we talked about last week how he put that tweet on the air about, come on and wear the golden armor. So I can only imagine you'd be happy to have some veteran experienced help, a shooter who can put the ball in the hole. And the Lakers are really lacking that right now. Between he and Julius Randle, who can score and is physical on defense, that is a skill upgrade. Could be a skill upgrade for the Lakers. Don't know how the money's going to work on that, though.
Hey, man, yeah, that would be something to see. To see those 2 prolific scorers and Julius Randle, that instantly makes them a contender again.
They'll be back in the playoffs, no doubt about that. I think they need to do something. They need to get a backup for Steve Nash. Nash has 1 year left on that contract with $10 million in his condition to be nuts to pass it up. I wouldn't pass up that money in the bank, but they need another point guard there.
Can you imagine, man, walking into work and seeing a new hire sitting in your office with his name on your door?
Oh man, I'd be hot. I mean, there's some people listening out there probably like, "Hey, he wants my job, he can have it, goodbye." But for the rest of us that like our jobs, yeah, I'd be a little hot under the collar right there. And Jeremy Lin's got to be a little. I don't think he's too beside himself, because the last year of his contract is his fat. He's getting paid, so he's like, "I'll wear 7, 9, 10. You shoot, whatever. Shoot, trade me. Getting paid, baby." So it's going to be fun to watch the free agency deals unfold in the NBA. Little deals have been going down really on each day, and we'll get you guys caught up on that next week.
Any update on the Pelicans, man?
Nothing yet on the Pelicans, but there have been some visits from this role player, that role player. I know before I got here, I read that Thabo Cephalosha signed a deal and I'm blanking out on which team it was, but that's a key role player right there who can help you with inside the paint on both ends of the court. So that's somebody who's off the table. And obviously it wasn't the Pelicans, but we'll see. I think there's going to be a lot more activity in the coming days. You have you just had the free agency period that opened up on Tuesday.
July
you have the
1st.
holiday, right, and you have the holidays coming up. I think you're going to see a lot of activity though in the next 7 days. On that, we'll have a lot more information for our listeners. Moving on to the National Football League. For our beloved Saints, well, it turns out Jimmy Graham is a tight end after all. The New Orleans Saints put the franchise tag on Jimmy Graham as the free agency period started. They, of course, offered a 1-year tender worth $7 million to Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham filed a grievance with the league, asked to be classified as a receiver. He's always among the league leaders in receptions. The Saints throwing the ball a lot. A whole lot, to say the least. He's a critical part of the passing game.
He's led the team in receptions.
Yeah, last 2-3 years, I believe. And he filed a grievance saying he wanted to be classified as a wide receiver instead of a tight end. I actually thought the odds were stacked against the Saints, but as I've heard some of the reasoning, I think it's actually, I can certainly understand where they're coming from. What I think is going to happen in the long run is that franchise formula for tight ends, because of the contract that he's about to sign, which is going to be pretty big from what I understand, and others, it's probably going to push that number up.
Yeah. Let's point out the importance of the difference between classified as a tight end and a wide receiver.
Correct.
It's about $7 million.
Correct. It's the franchise tag for a tight end. The 1 year, the mandated tender for a franchise tight end is $7 million. For a wide receiver, it's $12 million. So that's a $5 million gap.
Yeah.
That's about 80-70%, something like that difference. Big difference there.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. It's not so much about that 1 year tender, because even Jimmy Graham doesn't want to sign. Nobody wants to do a 1 year tender.
Right.
It blows up the team's salary cap. It doesn't guarantee the athlete anything beyond that first year.
Right.
But what it does is, had Jimmy Graham been classified as a wide receiver by by arbitrator Stephen Burbank, had he granted that request, it would have. The Saints only have $9 million left in the cap as it is. So poof, $5 million of that is gone, and that gives Graham significant leverage in negotiations. So both in terms of guaranteed and unguaranteed money.
Right.
So now they know where the starting point is. The thing that kind of turned my mind a little bit, and I guess changed my opinion on this, because like you, I'm thinking, well, he's so critical to our passing game, but there were some interesting points brought out. The biggest one that ESPN kind of jumped on, which is it's black and white, is that the average wide receiver lines up wide almost every down, 98% of the time. Jimmy Graham lines up wide 2/3 of the time. So that's a substantial step down in terms of the number of times you're actually lining up as a wide receiver, although the average tight end only lines up wide just under 1/3 of the time. So he's obviously used more in a receiving capacity, much more than the average tight end. But he even Tony Gonzalez, who is aging and not even playing every down, lined up in a wide position more times than Graham did. So he's not a groundbreaker, and he's not light years ahead of the field. And Gonzalez never made a claim as a wide receiver, nor did Rob Gronkowski, who also got paid some big money a couple of years ago, who was also used at the moment is the highest paid tight end in the year. I think that will definitely be eclipsed. Most of the sources are saying it's going to be around $12 million per year average, with a good chunk of that guaranteed. The other thing that I think turned my opinion a little bit on the subject, a couple of weeks ago, I had heard about a study that was done by Greg Cosell. He's an NFL films guy, very, very knowledgeable. I think this man spends his life in a film room. Very knowledgeable man. And he was saying that in this research he did on Graham, that in his number of catches, I forget the exact data, but the short story is, when a cornerback's covering him, his role shrinks significantly, far less to that of even Marcus Colston or Kenny Stills last year. He goes way down as far as his productivity. When he's covered by a linebacker or a safety, his numbers are like they are. And what really, I guess, struck a nerve with me, there were 2 games last year where I remember there was a cornerback put on him, and it limited his role, and the Saints lost. That was the Patriots game, where Aqib Talib was on him like white on rice, and he caught maybe 1 or 2 passes, I forget, very little. And when the Seattle Seahawks, they didn't put Sherman on him, they put their other cornerback, and his name's escaping me at the moment, but they put a cornerback on him the whole time, or a nickelback, and Jimmy Graham vanished, and the Saints were neutered offensively completely. So I thought there was something to that argument, and that was what I call there was evidence to back it up, both statistical and what you could see as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, here's my concern about that, or my problem with that. Strategy changes. So, Sean Payton's in the film room right now, and he's going to develop a new strategy for when there's a cornerback on Graham.
Right.
So just because last year he was ineffective when a cornerback was on him doesn't mean that this upcoming season the team will be ineffective with a cornerback covering Graham.
Right.
So I'm just not. I don't like using that as a litmus test for productivity, because things change strategically in the NFL from year to year, from week to week, So, but I get it. Here's the point. As long as the Saints pay this man what he's worth, and it sounds like they are going to, that just placing the franchise tag on him was strategic.
Well, choice.
So that he would not leave.
Right.
But you don't want a disgruntled, underpaid
star
no in your locker room. No. You just don't.
No, and they know that.
And they know that.
None of these people were born yesterday. This is a matter of negotiation.
Right.
And it's kind of like we said with LeBron James. You owe it to yourself to take inventory of your options. And Jimmy Graham, as prolific a pass catcher as he is, I was about to say pass catching tight end. That might be a subliminal tip towards the arbitrator, but as great of a pass catcher as he is, he should take inventory of his options. And hey, maybe he could get a little bump. You know, the arbitrator might have said, you know what, maybe for guys who line up 50% of the time at wide, we're going to set the level here. That wasn't what happened. But what is going to happen is more, the franchise formula is based on the top paid players at the position. You're going to have more. Antonio Gates is on the back end of his career, but Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham
just pushed up the salary for tight ends.
Right, it's going to that rising tide's going to lift all their boats.
So the Players Association pushed this, along with probably his agent.
Oh yes, and he did. And that was his agent was very out in front. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but his agent was very much in the forefront of pushing this. And that's your job, and that's what you're supposed to do.
That's right.
So somebody, Jimmy Graham's going to get paid. Somebody, 5-6 years down the line is really going to get paid because of this right now. No getting around that. All right, so also in the National Football League, Perry, I'll let you take off on this one because I know you read more details than I did on this.
Yeah, man. Last year in August, we heard about the $765 million concussion settlement that the NFL offered retired players. Well, then around October, November-ish, it came out that the judge said that was not enough money. Judge Anita Brody said that was not enough money, and she was not going to accept this settlement that the NFL had offered. So now, bringing that up to today, 7 retired players who played for a total of 66 NFL seasons have filed a suit against the proposed settlement, saying that they agree with the judge and it is not enough money. And 2 of those players included in this 7-player lawsuit are former LSU players. Alan Finica, an offensive lineman who played 13 seasons, mostly with the Steelers, between 1998 and 2010. And Robert Royal, a tight end who played for 3 teams between 2002 and 2010. Joining them in this lawsuit is, Sean Morey, a special teams player who played for 5 teams between 99 and 2000. Rock Cartwright, a fullback and a kick returner who played for 2 teams between 2002 and 2011. Jeff Rohr, an outside linebacker who played for the Cowboys between 1982 and 1989. And Sean Considine, a strong safety who played for 5 teams between 2005 and 2012. So now the NFL, which forced the NFL's hand, now the NFL is proposing that the lawsuit be uncapped, that the settlement be uncapped.
Really?
Yes. That any former player, retired player with a legitimate claim of concussion issues or neurocognitive illness, that they will cover their medical expenses.
That sounds great, but the skeptic in me is coming out and saying, what's in it for the NFL to uncap their liability?
Well, PR, I would think.
Well, sure, I agree with that. There's PR, and also I think, the other thing, too, is that if you uncap and just say, we're going to take care of them, well, they're obviously going to have precedent with the players they begin compensating, but it stops this media showcase of them being in court all the time, showing as the big bad NFL trying to jab the former players. So
right.
I could kind of see how they want to get it over with.
They want to get it over with, and they are still also the determining body of what's a qualifying injury.
I see. That makes some sense too. And then and the injuries are the litany. Obviously, the CTE is the one that I think probably sends fear through all these former players. Just hearing it and knowing some of the stuff we've seen in the news. That's cardio traumatic encephalopathy. That's very scary stuff. And obviously, I'm sure that one would warrant a much larger chunk than your typical garden variety motor problems.
And according to the senior vice president, Anastasia Denies of the NFL, today's agreement reaffirms the NFL's commitment to provide help to those retired players and their families who are in need, and to do so without the delay, expense, and emotional costs associated with protracted litigation. We are eager to move forward with the process of court approval and implementation of the settlement.
Oh, I believe every word that Miss Anastasia said. I believe all that. They are ready to move on and get this over with as quickly as possible. Well, that's good. That's going to be... I hope that this is starting to wind down, and I just hope these guys are taken care of, as I think they probably will be. I think the NFL has a vested interest in moving forward past this unpleasant mark, frankly, stain on the shield, so to speak.
Right.
On to the diamond, Major League Baseball. One thing about Major League Baseball and July, it owns the month about as much as it will own any month out of the sports cycle. It is pretty much the only show in town.
All right, we've got our field reporter from St. Louis, and let's go to our field reporter, Brian. Brian, what's going on in St. Louis today?
Good morning, Perry. Today here at Busch Stadium, we have the Miami Marlins in town. Last night we had a fantastic fireworks show after the game. Pitching in today's game is Andrew Heaney for the Marlins. He's a 6'2", 185-pound left-hander who was 0-3 on the season with a 5.29 ERA. Pitching today for the Cardinals is Shelby Miller, a 6'3", 215-pound right-hander who was 7-7 on the season with a 4.10 ERA.
Awesome, man. That should be a pretty good game. Neither pitcher is very dominating. That should be an awesome game today there in St. Louis. Hey, Brian, if you would just stay with us for a minute, man. I've been trying to ask you this question the last couple of times you reported, and you haven't been able to give me an answer, man. I just want to know, what position in the lineup is the African-American player for the Cardinals batting today? Eric, wow, did he hang up on us?
I think he threw us the deuces, Barry, and he just pieced out on us.
Wow, man, he keeps doing that to us.
I don't get it. I just don't get it. We're going to go ahead and run through our division leaders. In the National League, strike that. In the American League East, got a three-way battle still brewing now. The Toronto Blue Jays have been on top of that division almost since the start of the season, but in the last week, the Yankees have really kind of gone in a slump. They've lost 5 straight, and the Baltimore Orioles have taken over second place in that division. The Yankees 4.5 games back. The Orioles only 1 game back of the division-leading Blue Jays. In the American League Central, as has been the case almost every week this year, the Detroit Tigers continue to stay on the top of that division. They fell into a little bit of a hole. The Kansas City Royals took an extremely brief lead in that division, and the Tigers woke up from their hibernation. They have won 8 of their last 10. They are 4.5 games ahead of the Kansas City Royals. In the American League West, it's a three-team race. The Rangers and Astros are out of it. The Oakland Athletics continue to lead that division. They continue to have the best record in the majors. They are 3.5 games ahead of the Los Angeles Angels and 4.5 games ahead of the Seattle Mariners, who've won 8 of 10. They are on fire right now. Their bats have come to life, the likes of which I haven't seen in a very, very long time, and it is really showing, and it's making a difference in Seattle. Their pitchers have always been dominant. They actually have given up the fewest runs of any team in the American League, so the Seattle Mariners have injected themselves into that AL West race. In the National League, back and forth and back. Right this week, the Braves are on top of that division. Next week they might not be, but for the moment they're a half game ahead of the Washington Nationals. The Miami Marlins, as I've been saying all year, I thought some space was going to come between the Marlins and those two division-leading teams. They had been 2 games, game and a half, 2.5 games back, but they really fell. They lost 6 of their last 10. They're now 5.5 games back of the Atlanta Braves. I expect that spacing to continue, though the Marlins are definitely a team headed in the right direction. In the National League Central, all of a sudden we have a 4-team race again. I mean, really the only team not in the equation is the Chicago Cubs. The Milwaukee Brewers have been on top of that division all year. They are 5 games ahead of the St. Louis Cardinals, which is about how far back the Cardinals have been for most of the year, that 3 to 5 game margin. But the Pittsburgh Pirates have finally caught fire. They've won 8 of 10. They are now just 6 games back. They looked like they were going to fall into that double-digit games back line, a barrier, which is always an omen of doom for a lot of teams this time of year. They have recovered. The Reds, winners of 6 of 10, they're only 7 games back. So you have Milwaukee in first, St. Louis 5 games back, Pittsburgh 6 games back, Cincinnati Reds 7 games back. That division race has gotten very interesting very quickly. In the National League West, it's a 2-team race between the San Francisco Giants and the Los Angeles Dodgers, who are at the moment tied atop that division. The Dodgers have gotten pretty hot. They've won 6 of 10. They've been pretty consistent and gotten a little push of late. The Giants got off like gangbusters and have kind of cooled off a little bit. They've lost 8 of 10, but their pitchers look like they are the pitchers that helped them win the World Series in 2012 and 2010, so I expect that to be a good slugfest between 2 bitter century-old rivals in the National League. Moving on to our statistical leaders in the American League, I've talked about Jose Altuve a little bit. He was really, the Astros have lost 100 straight games, 3 straight years, and I have not had a lot of kind words about them, but I've always had a yeah but for shortstop Jose Altuve. And really, he and the Astros are starting to come to fruition. That team is finally showing some progress in the right direction. Altuve is the American League batting leader with a .343 average. Adrian Beltre of the Texas Rangers at .335. That's another AL West team that's won't be around in October, but Beltre standing out individually. Victor Martinez, great move from catcher to DH. I think that's done his knees and his legs a lot of good. He is tied for third with Robinson Cano for AL batting with a .323 average. Robinson Cano, of course, with the red-hot Seattle Mariners. I'll tell you, Jose Abreu, I've been saying all year, came out of nowhere. I actually watched the series between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Chicago White Sox last week. Wasn't much else on. But I got to say, I'm starting to buy into what they're selling with Jose Abreu, leading the AL with 26 home runs. This guy looks like he's one of those young stars who's starting to turn a corner. He's really starting to jump off the stats page. Nelson Cruz of the Baltimore Orioles also, and Edwin Encarnacion, 3-way tie at the top of the American League with 26 home runs each. Victor Martinez way back with 20 of the Detroit Tigers. Edwin Encarnacion of the Blue Jays also leading in RBIs. Nelson Cruz of the Orioles right behind him with 68. Encarnacion with 69. Jose Abreu with 67 of the Chicago White Sox. So he's definitely interesting to watch his star rise, and interesting to watch the Blue Jays make this resurgence. Right now,
they are really making a resurgence.
Yeah, right now I'll say Edwin Encarnacion at this moment, today, July 5th, 2014, MVP. Is my pick for AL MVP at the moment. Jose Altuve also leading the American League way ahead in stolen bases with 37. Jacoby Ellsbury with 23 in second, so that's a 14 stolen base gap. He's just running away with it. In the American League, in the pitching category, Masahiro Tanaka continues to dominate. He is tied with King Felix Hernandez of the Seattle Mariners with a 2.10 ERA. Yu Darvish of the Texas Rangers in third with a 2.42 ERA. Mark Burley of the Blue Jays with a 2.5 ERA. It wins Rick Porcello of the Detroit Tigers with 11. Masahiro Tanaka also tied with Porcello with 11 for first in the American League in wins. And in third place, Mark Burley and King Felix Hernandez tied with 10 wins apiece in the American League. Strikeouts, another great player on a team that's struggling for reasons I can't comprehend. David Price leading the AL in strikeouts of the Tampa Bay Rays with 153 strikeouts. Big gap there. Second in the AL is Felix Hernandez with 137. So David Price having an exceptional season but with a terrible year for his team right now.
Right.
Fernando Rodney has been a big part of that resurgence in Seattle, and he leads the American League in saves with 24 saves. Immediately behind him is Greg Holland of the Kansas City Royals with 23 saves. In the American League. In the National League, batting leaders, Troy Tulowitzki continues to run away with the National League batting race. He has a .351 average. Doesn't hurt that he's playing at Coors Field. Jonathan, no, not one iota. Jonathan Lucroy, though, of the Milwaukee Brewers, he's having a breakout season. There's no other way to describe it. And he's right behind, second to Tulowitzki with a 331 batting average. The gap really widens after that. You have Matt Adams of St. Louis, Justin Marno of Colorado, and Yasiel Puig of Los Angeles, third, fourth, and fifth with 318, 315, and 314 batting averages, respectively. Giancarlo Stanton of the Miami Marlins is leading the National League in home runs with 21 home runs. Troy Tulowitzki, and I've always known he's a very solid power hitter, but he's having a power breakout too. Better watch out, brother. The PED guy's gonna be coming around. Better make sure your nose is clean, because Tulowitzki has 18 home runs already this season. I don't have his career stats in front of me, but he's got to be on a pace the likes of which he's been seldom in his career. Also in home runs, Todd Frazier of the Cincinnati Reds with 17 home runs. Anthony Rizzo is one of those guys. Also, I've ripped on the Cubs a lot, but I've always said he's one of the bright spots.
And justifiably so.
Oh yeah, they're
the Cubs.
Yeah, but the one bright spot I've often said is Anthony Rizzo, young guy, a lot of power, and it's starting to come to fruition. He's tied with Todd Frazier for third in National League home runs with 17. Giancarlo Stanton also leading the National League with 61 RBIs. Justin Marno of Colorado with 58. Paul Goldschmidt with 53. Adrian Gonzalez of the Dodgers with 52. Paul Goldschmidt, the first baseman, probably going to be an all-star with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Stolen bases, D. Gordon, 40 stolen bases this year. He's literally running away in the stolen base chase. Pun completely intended there. And it's really not that close afterwards. There's a gap of about 5. Second place is Billy Hamilton of Cincinnati with 35, and then it gets the next third place is 23. So it's pretty much two guys running away with that in the National League. Adam Wainwright, ERA leader in the National League with a 1.89 ERA. Johnny Cueto with a 1.99 ERA. That's been pretty consistent all year long. Adam Wainwright leading the NL in wins with 11. Zach Greinke and Alfredo Simon of Cincinnati tied with 10 for second place in the National League with wins, and Madison Bumgarner, along with 4 others, tied with 9 in fourth place. Steven Strasburg mowing down the National League as he has been every healthy year with 131 strikeouts. Johnny Cueto with 130. Big gap. Third place is Madison Bumgarner of the Giants with 120. That's Johnny Cueto of the Cincinnati Reds, Steven Strasburg of the Washington Nationals. And K-Rod, another big part of the Milwaukee Brewers resurgence. He continues to lead the National League in saves, as he has most of this season, with 27 saves. Craig Kimbrell with 26 for the Atlanta Braves, and Kenley Jansen and Trevor Rosenthal. Kenley Jansen of the LA Dodgers, Trevor Rosenthal of the St. Louis Cardinals tied for third at 25 saves apiece. So those are your statistical leaders in Major League Baseball, getting you caught up on which teams are doing what and who's who, as you'll hear probably hear a whole lot of those names as the season continues to progress.
Yes.
circling back to an earlier story.
Hey, man, on our baseball, before we leave our baseball report, when's the All-Star game? It's got to be coming up soon.
It's, if I remember, June, it's a Tuesday. I want to say it's the, let's see. So that All-Star game will be July 15th at Target Field in Minnesota. That is a beautiful stadium, as opposed to the dump they played in at the Metrodome prior to that. While I love the new stadium, I, for the life of me, don't understand why you take that stadium and put them outdoors when April's in Minneapolis and September's in Minneapolis.
September!
And not, I'm not even mention if they make it to the playoffs. That's going to be taxing.
Whoa!
But
I mean, the Vikings are going to play outdoors this year as well.
yeah, but that's not intentional. That's not long term. They don't want that for long.
Right.
But there's a reason that they haven't played an outdoor. You know that old Metropolitan Stadium closed down a long time ago. The Brooklyn Nets recently hired a new head coach. On Wednesday, they announced they had hired Lionel Hollins to replace Jason Kidd as their head coach in Brooklyn. Lionel Hollins had a lot of, first of all, it's a very long coaching tenure, but had a lot of success really pulling the Memphis Grizzlies from an also-ran in the Western Conference into a team that could contend and advance in the playoffs. He was a coach of a Memphis team that was an 8th-seeded team that pulled off an upset over the first seed, really helped develop Zach Randolph's game.
Yeah.
Hollins was a guy, Memphis, quote-unquote, fired him. There were a lot of philosophical disagreements. I think the Rudy Gay trade might have been a straw that broke the camel's back. But he really helped develop that team and make them into a team to take seriously. Very good defensive coach. I've compared him to a poor man's Greg Popovich before, in that he knows how to go as far down on his bench as he needs to and squeeze every drop of juice from the lemon to get the best he can out of his players defensively. Good defensive mind, knows how to coach physical basketball in an era where it's harder to play physical basketball because of the rules. And I think with those veterans he has in Brooklyn, I think that it's unfortunate that Sean Livingston took a free agency contract because he's a really good defensive stopgap they had who was a little younger. But nonetheless, I think with those veterans they have in Brooklyn, I think he's an excellent fit for that Brooklyn Nets job.
As well as former LSU player Marcus Thornton.
That's
man.
right.
So if he can teach him some defense,
right.
he'll make that kid a lot of money.
Any defense.
right. Because right now he's just a scorer.
Right.
But it's not surprising that he is a defensive-minded person. In 1978, he was first team all-defense NBA player.
Makes sense to me.
Right.
That pedigree just moves right along. Didn't know that, though.
In 2004, he was named the Memphis Grizzlies head coach. He has a history of being a good head coach, as you mentioned. In 2008 and 2009, he was an assistant with the Milwaukee Bucks. And from 2009 to 2013, which is what you alluded to, he was the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. And now he is the new head coach of the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, I really like that fit. It's going to be interesting because, look, one thing I'll say is that, when you bring in veterans, especially future Hall of Famers, as we saw with the Miami experiment, they won 2 championships, with the Heatles, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was a little rocky that first year finding the chemistry, no matter how talented you are.
That's right.
And I think Jason Kidd had an extra challenge because he's playing with people who were his peers just months prior.
His competitors.
Right, his competitors, his peers, and so now he's kind of, he got off to a really tough start, but he picked it up. They got the train going in the right direction. I think they found their chemistry, whatever it needs to be. So I think Hollins, especially being an experienced coach, is not going to have as rough a transition as other coaches might have taking over with those veterans in place. So that's going to be really fun to watch next year, seeing how that unfolds in New Jersey, in Brooklyn.
Good catch.
Last story we're going to talk about, the Americans finally, their World Cup run finally came to an end, losing 2-1 in extra time to Germany on Tuesday, but I got to say that it was a really fun run to watch. In the group action, the group of death, the Americans survived in advance over favored Portugal and Ghana. They had a win over Ghana, a draw with Portugal, and only lost by 1 goal to Germany, which was all they needed to advance comfortably into the knockout round. And they gave Germany everything they had. There was no score. I'm sorry, I just said Germany. Belgium. They lost to Belgium 2-1 in extra time. Sorry about that, folks. Belgium. No waffles, no chocolate for me for a while. Anyway, they lost to Belgium. It was scoreless at the end of regulation. well, whatever they call it, regular time, whatever those soccer people call it. They had to add on 30 minutes of extra time.
We got to get up to speed
I know,
man.
shame on me.
It is just the world's most popular sport.
The Americanism is just flowing out of me right now. But Tim Howard of the United States was a monster. Strategically, the Belgians completely outplayed the United States, but Tim Howard made registered 16 saves. That was the most saves in a World Cup game by a player since the 1960s. He was a beast, man among men. Belgium kept the ball in the Americans' half of the pitch almost the entire game. The Americans' only best chance really to score came in that extra time period where a young fella, a 19-year-old who just came off the bench in a substitution. I cannot remember his name. But
Julian Green.
Thank you. Julian Green came up and had a timely goal and gave the Americans a tiny ray of hope. That was the only goal the Belgians had allowed from open play in the entire World Cup tournament. So small moral victory to take away from that. But the Belgians had outplayed the Americans and it showed. But still, great run for the United States. I believe this appearance in the round of 16, the knockout round, and the appearance in 2010, those were the only advancements the Americans had made since like the 1930s are not in play, or in a very long time in my lifetime, and I'm almost 40, to the knockout round. So great job by the grand old US of A. I think this is going to be a real building block for the game and for the American sport.
You like to think so. Quick story, Eric. I'm listening to the game on ESPN radio, and as they put in Julian Green, the ESPN color commentator goes, I don't understand why they're putting him in.
I heard that. I was listening. I was in the car. I just left work. I heard that too. And I'm like, but even the other guy said he was a goal. He was an offense. He was one of those guys. I guess what we call in basketball a pure shooter or something.
Yes.
A guy who's a specialist for attacking, and it worked.
And he was like, but instead of going for the future, I'd rather go for the present.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, it'll shut him up fast. You didn't hear him say a peep the rest of the tournament. I did hear that. If you listen to ESPN radio, if you were in the car too, that definitely got your antenna up. Like, this kid comes in and scores in like 3 minutes, shuts you up quick.
And we hadn't scored all game.
Yeah, this is a waste of time. They're giving up and blah, blah, blah. Score! Go, 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 go.
And he was probably the most excited person in the stadium.
Yeah, you got that right.
Tim Howard set a record, had the most saves in 50 years of the World Cup by having 16 saves. Which is just phenomenal.
He was incredible. A lot of those were not easy saves. A lot of those were this hand pushing the ball just over the rim, over the net, deflecting it. Foot saves, which are, for goalies, as I understand, are very difficult.
Yes.
He was amazing. I mean, he was Superman.
And you know what, though, Eric? We talked about on this show how defensive-minded that Belgium team was.
Right, and they showed it.
And they showed it.
They kept the Americans off their side of the pitch. I mean, the ball didn't advance down there very much, and the few times it did, it got kicked away very, very quickly. The Belgians are a very good defensive team. Even I could see that. I know only a few A, B's, and C's about soccer, so, great job by the Belgians, and they're going to advance on and watch some of this quarterfinal action. It's going to be, if you enjoyed watching the Americans, you have nothing else to do, I think you'll enjoy watching some of the action. I got a real appreciation for the gameplay, just speaking for myself, in following the Americans and watching a couple of other matches. The Brazilians, when they narrowly escaped against, I think it was Costa Rica or Chile, or one of those South American teams.
Yeah, you've got to figure they're going to win this thing.
They look awful. Them, Argentina, you got the powerhouses. Them, Argentina, Germany, these are names I see every 4 years, always around at the end. So the Brazilians, from what I'm hearing, apparently are the prohibitive favorites. They are very athletic. But even the Chileans show they can be humbled a little bit. I mean, it went to penalty kicks in that game. So we'll see. It's going to be fun. If you enjoyed the action, keep watching, because I think it's going to continue to get better.
Yeah, and the previous record before Howard's performance against Belgium with 16 saves, the previous record was 13 saves.
Great run, and it was fun to watch. And, we're out of time this week. We appreciate you joining us on this 4th of July weekend. Happy birthday, USA. Go USA. And as we always say around this time,
ADT, JNS, love you.
Have a good and safe afternoon.
Hail to the king and lots of love. May he protect us from the evil. Hail to the king, lots of love.